Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and this is my book, How to Kill an Addiction, Recovery with God. In this book, I talk about ways to walk out of life-controlling issues, and we pretty much all have them, by developing a relationship with God. And I also have 20 powerful testimonies of real people who have done just that, so I'd love it if you check it out. But every week I interview somebody who has overcome a life controlling issue. And this week my guest is Rikki. Rikki, welcome to Voices of Recovery.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great to have you. So thank you so much for being here. And if you would just take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience, please.
I'm Rikki. Rikki M is the title or the author name on my book. I just got married in February, so it's Rikki Milbrandt now. My first book is actually Rikki Meister.
Okay.
I live in Arizona. I just moved down here about a year ago, and my husband and I are just loving it so much. We live in a tiny park model home with 2 cats, and I have my daughter over in Minnesota still in college.
That is awesome. Well, that's beautiful. And congratulations on being newly married. And I also want to congratulate you because you are releasing your second book coming up here very soon. And the book is about the dark side of sobriety. If you could give us the full title.
So it's called The Dark Side of Sobriety, and the subtitle is Supporting Your Significant Other Without Losing Yourself.
That is a powerful statement right there. And I think just when I saw the title of your book, Dark Side of Sobriety, it really caught me because it's like, well, isn't sobriety just this tiptoe through the tulips, just rainbows and puppies and unicorns? And it isn't. It's part of the journey. It's not always easy, but definitely worth it. But then that subtitle talks about what you're doing and how you were helping your loved one. It was your fiance at the time, now your husband, on his journey of sobriety. And like your title indicates, you can lose yourself, right? You can lose yourself in that journey by doing everything you can for your partner, your significant other, as you call it, and not have your own life. So let's talk about that. How does, first of all, the first question that I really been wanting to ask you is, how does your husband feel about you writing the book? Because you share some very personal things in here, Rikki, about his journey, about your journey as well. What are his thoughts about you putting it out there?
Well, you are not the first person to ask.
Darn, I was hoping to be the first, but it's okay.
His counselor is actually asking the same things, his mom, everybody. But his ultimate decision for me to write the book, when I told him I wanted to do it, was that if it's going to help at least one other person, then he is okay with having his story out there. He says it's completely embarrassing, the stuff that's happened to him, the stuff that I write about. He's very embarrassed about it, but he feels that when I wrote my first book about myself, he's like, well, you put yourself out there and it's helping other people, so why can't I do the same?
That's incredibly powerful, because there is that balance. On one hand, I'm embarrassed. I'm kind of ashamed of some of the things that have happened. And I'm not just talking about Eric, I'm talking about my own journey as well. Yeah. But then that desire to help other people kind of overrides that. Like if I could just help one person by sharing my story, and I shared my story in my book about recovery with God. So I'm one of the 20 that I talked about in the intro. And I had to have a heart-to-heart with my own husband because I shared some very personal things. But that was my old life. Like, that's not who I am today. And I'm moving forward in my new life. And again, my desire in writing the book and doing Voices of Recovery and interviewing people like you, Rikki, is to help other people. And we know that with addiction, kind of just unfortunately growing. I think it's growing because of everything that's happened with the pandemic, and people are stressed out and turning to substances to make them feel better. There are loved ones who are greatly impacted by that. And so that's your piece, that you come in and you share that, and that I just really appreciate what you're doing, and that you're being courageous, and your husband is being courageous and letting it be released.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited about this book coming out, because when we first started this journey of him going to treatment, I thought, okay, he's going to treatment. Oh my gosh, I can just finally rest and relax.
Right.
And, treatment was easy. It's when
Yes.
he got home, that was like, oh my gosh,
Wow.
I hadn't figured on all this stuff that can happen after he
Sure.
got better.
Yes,
So
and you detail that in the book really well. And so let's go ahead and jump into that. So when you met Eich, who's now your husband, did you know that he had a drinking problem? Did he have a drinking problem at that time?
I didn't really know the extent of it. I knew we would have a cocktail after work every now and then, or, one or two, but then I didn't really know the extent of how far it went. Like, because we didn't live together, of course. I was still living with my daughter in Minnesota in a town, and he was living about a half an hour away from me. So he would leave my house, go home, and come to find out he would go home and drink some more, where I wouldn't. One or two was enough for me, and it wasn't for him. But I didn't know that at first. It took a while for me to realize that he's drinking more than he's claiming to be. And
sure,
it also had, we worked together in the same company, not in the same department. So he would come say hi to me every morning. And I could tell in the morning that he was kind of tired looking, unfocused, and I could smell a little bit of alcohol on him still.
Okay.
So that gave me some pretty big red flags right there. And that's when we started the conversation.
Okay. Well, you write about the red flags in the book, and you write about several actually, but let's just talk about a couple.
Sure.
We can't cover everything, but I definitely want to point people to read the book because it's very, very helpful. What are a couple of red flags, Rikki, that you think are significant and that people really need to look out for?
I think one of the biggest ones is lying about how much you actually are drinking.
Okay.
Because with Eich, I would ask him, if, like, when he would get to my house, did you already drink? Have you already been drinking? Oh, no. And he would lie. And no, I haven't been drinking. But, you can tell, especially if you know that person really well, you can tell that either they have had a drink or whatever drug of choice they're doing. It doesn't even matter if it's alcohol or, cocaine or whatever. You can tell when somebody is lying to you, especially if you're very close to that person. So that's the biggest red flag for me, because it was so significant in our relationship where he would tell me that, no, he's not drinking. No, I'm not going to go home and have any more to drink. But he would call me when he got home, and I could tell that he was drinking, and he would get even more inebriated. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So that's why I write that one in there, because you need to really keep an eye out for how much they're lying, and if it's becoming more prevalent during the relationship, because, at the beginning, you're not going to notice it as much. You'll figure it out that, okay, yeah, they were drinking, you can tell, but eventually it's going to be all the time. It's just going to get more and more. The lying is going to come out even more during the course of the relationship, and it's going to cause a strain. So that's why I write about lying. I can't remember if I put that on at the very first red flag or not, but it's definitely a big one.
Yes, absolutely. And you talked about hiding the problem, and I think the number one red flag, if my notes are accurate here, is the increased use.
Oh, yes.
And you talked about that, like having a couple drinks with you and then going home and having more.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you this. You see red flags in your significant other, okay? And then you're also probably at the same time kind of falling for this person, right? So at what point do you realize, okay, I'm seeing red flags, I need to end this relationship, or I'm seeing red flags, I need to engage more and help this person because I really care about this person, right? So there's kind of a little bit of a balance there. in and how you proceed. And of course, every story is different and every person is different, and God is going to lead you in to do different things, right? There's not like, okay, here's the formula, guys, that you're going to use. But just what are your thoughts on that? Red flags versus, I'm going to leave. I can't be in a relationship with somebody who has this problem versus, okay, we need to get help for this person because I really am concerned and I care about him or her.
Well, for that one, it's very difficult to decide what you want to do when your significant other is in that state. For me, it was, I know he's such a wonderful person, and he had some struggles in his life that led him to this drinking problem. And even though I saw those red flags, we had talked about it. So he knew he had a problem. Okay. He was starting to take some steps to fixing that problem. He wasn't admitting how far the problem was. Okay. So eventually, I did give him chance after chance after chance. And, we both decided to quit drinking altogether for an entire month. It was in November. We're like, you know what, let's not drink all this month. Let's take a break. And I talked to him about that because I was getting concerned about him, but instead of confronting him saying he has a drinking problem, let's take a break and see how that works for us.
Right.
Let's work together. But he didn't make it through the month. It was maybe a week into it. He came over to my house completely wasted. And I'm like, okay, so there's my next red flag. He's drinking more. He's not doing what he's saying he's going to do. What should I do? And for me, it was either leave him or help him. And I have that personality where I need to help people.
Yeah.
So, and I really did love him. I had known him for 20 years prior to our relationship even starting. Okay. And, he had known my mother for several years before that as well. And so I knew how much of a wonderful man he is. And so I felt like I needed to give him a chance to fix the problem.
Sure.
And yeah, like you said, it is different for everyone. Like I've had past relationships where once I noticed a big red flag in the relationship, I was like, all right, I can't do this. I'm done. This is not healthy for me. But you have to personally choose what's going to be healthy for you to be, if you can help this person and if they're willing to get help.
Yes.
That's
so important, right? It would be wonderful if we could just wish that person or pray that person into wanting to get help, but that person needs to want help.
Absolutely.
So important to understand. Well, I am a life coach, and one of the things that I help people understand is this idea that stop saying, here's what you're going to do. Here's what all the people in my life are going to do. When my spouse does this, when my kids do this, when my parents do this, when my coworkers do this, then I'm going to be happy. And that is going to put you on a treadmill of frustration and going nowhere. What we have to get to the point in saying is, here's what I'm going to do. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't. I wish you would do this, but I don't know that you're going to do that. But here's what I'm going to do. And we really need to get to that point where we take our power back and start making some decisions, right? So as an example, and you put this in your book, if you're going to continue drinking, here's what I'm going to do for my own health, for my own sanity, for my own peace of mind, right? And we really need to get to that place, because wanting everybody else to change we don't have the control. We can't change people. We can only change ourselves and decide what we're going to do. So I know that you kind of came to that point. We talked a little bit about the red flags. Then you talk in the book about kind of him hitting a rock bottom. And when we have a loved one who has an addiction or a life controlling issue, we think, certainly you've reached rock bottom, right? This is your rock bottom, but they get a shovel and they keep digging. It's not their rock bottom. So let's talk about that. I kind of threw two things at you. Let's talk about the rock bottom and then how to get to that place of making a decision for yourself on what you're going to do. So you can talk about this as much as you want to. You share it in depth in the book, but Erich's rock bottom and what that looked like.
Okay, so for Eric's rock bottom, like you said, I thought he had hit his rock bottom several times before he actually hit the final rock bottom. It was, time after time, like you got sent home from work, he got fired from his job, and there were a few other instances in there that I thought, okay, this is it. Now he's going to finally do something.
Right.
And, him doing something was, yes, when he got fired from his job, he did do some treatment, outpatient, where it was at home online, and that, it wasn't working. And finally, I do mention in the book, and I do, like you said, go into very much detail about that final rock bottom. I won't describe the whole story here, but ultimately he hit his head, ended up in the hospital, and I talked to his counselor about it, and she actually did advise me to give him an ultimatum. A lot of times you're not advised to do that because that person will resent you for it. But she said, I think that is his only hope right now, that you tell him what you need. And if you can't have that, you need to leave. So I did go into the hospital after, I wasn't allowed to stay overnight because of, the pandemic and everything.
Sure.
But when I came to visit him the next day, he had no idea what had happened, why he was even there. And we talked about it, and I did tell him, I had to set my boundary. I said, if you are going to not go to treatment and get the help you need, then I need to be out. I cannot, I'll be your friend. I will help you in that way, but I will not be your significant other. I will not be your partner in this. So, yeah. So those boundaries really, really do need to be set. No matter where you are in that relationship, you have to set boundaries to keep yourself sane and keep yourself healthy.
Sure. You write about in the book, Rikki, that the ultimatum can sometimes backfire on you, because it's like, okay, here's the boundary, here's what I'm going to do. And then they don't respond the way you want to. And then it's like, well, I didn't really mean it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the tricky part. Like, we have to mean what we say and say what we mean. We have to set that boundary and then follow through. So if we're not prepared to follow through, we probably shouldn't just make these threats. And I think a lot of people do that. I do that with my, when my kids were little, parenting, like, I'm going to pull over the car, I'm going to ground you for 5 years, and then they know that you don't be in business because you don't follow through. But that's a whole other interview.
Right.
But yeah, you talked about that ultimatum, but it's kind of what I talked about earlier. Like, here's what I need you to do. And if you don't, here's what I'm going to do.
Yes.
And I love the way that you put it, that I'm still going to be your friend. Like, you didn't say, I'm leaving you, I'm never going to speak to you again, I'm completely out of your life. Like, I'll still be your friend, I'll still support you, but I can't be your significant other, as you put it, right?
Right.
And that had to be an incredibly scary and tough thing to do. But at the same time, he almost died. He almost died in this incident. It was incredibly scary for you. And, when you're talking about life or death situations, you've got to make very, very tough decisions.
Yes, you absolutely do. And like you said, you have to follow through. If you are going to make that threat, you have to follow through. If you don't, it's the same with children. You can't say you're going to punish them and not do it.
Right.
And this was the same with Eric. I had to come to that conclusion that if he is not going to do this, then I have to be prepared to walk out the door. Right. And it was a very tough decision for me because I love him. I didn't want to end the relationship. And, that was a big struggle I had within my own mind. Like, what am I going to do? Now I have to move on again, and I have to be alone again. I have to find myself all over again. And what am I going to do if he doesn't choose to get the help? I thank God every day that he did choose to get the help, but I'd be in a completely different situation right now had he not. And I had to be prepared for that to happen as well. So I did spend time getting my ducks in a row. Prior to having the conversation with him. I had to make sure that I was prepared in life to be on my own again.
Absolutely. That's so good. Okay. So you talked about treatment in the book.
Yes.
And you kind of talk about different levels. Like you said, okay, he agreed to go into treatment, but it was like an online thing. And then it was during the pandemic. So people weren't meeting. And you just said it wasn't really a good fit for him. And you make it clear in the book, Rikki, that, this is not a cookie cutter situation where this is where everybody needs to go. Some people could probably do really well with an online community, right? Some people need that in person, and some people need an actual facility. But the way that you put it in the book, the way I read it is that, like, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to start with an online community. Okay, that didn't really work. So now I kind of need to go to the next level of help, to the point where he actually went into a facility. Okay. And so it was a progression. And was it a situation where, like, maybe he wasn't ready to go straight from the hospital after falling and hurting himself and hitting his head to being in a facility? He kind of had to come to that conclusion through other steps. Okay, this isn't working. This isn't working. Kind of explain that. You really put it well in the book, and you shared the different options. But if you would just elaborate on that, that would be helpful.
Yep. So before he hit his rock bottom, he actually was talking to my cousin who is in AA, and he's been in it for 7 or 8 years now, been sober ever since. And AA, just going to meetings, worked really well for him. And this was, of course, before we had to do things online. Sure. So he was in person. But when Eric decided to try AA, we were able to go in person. So we went to a few meetings together with my cousin, and we got a lot out of it. But then it was excuses that he would make. Well, the meeting is too late at night and too far away, which really, because you're about 10 minutes away from where the meeting is. How is that too far? I know we work at 6 o'clock in the morning, but come on, man. And then it was
10-minute drive. It's just so horrible.
Right? And then it was about online. Well, if you don't want to go in person, then do it online in a Zoom meeting. That's what they're doing. Also, it's right there. Well, I don't like to. I can't pay attention. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, the next time I thought he was hitting rock bottom, as he lost his job, he did the outpatient treatment, which was his counselor recommended. We got him set up with a program, and the town we lived in, or the surrounding areas that we lived in, they only offered the outpatient treatment online. It was all Zoom, which I knew was going to be a problem because he is more of that, I need in person.
Yes.
Or I'm not going to pay attention. I'm going to sit, I'm going to fall asleep. And there is that added thing where, okay, you're on a Zoom call, but you don't know what I'm drinking here in my cup. I could be having a drink right now while I'm talking to you on an AA meeting. There was that, and then the rock bottom where he finally hit his head and finally decided that treatment was the best option. That was inpatient. He did have to go. We had to find a facility where my cousin actually did help us with that. He gave us a really good facility in Minnesota. It was about an hour and a half away from where we lived, which was really good because there's not that temptation about leaving treatment and going to the bars that or the liquor stores that or trying to sneak it in. And so yeah, there is definitely that progression. You could start with one thing, and if that doesn't work, let's try something new. It's the same with anything in life. If something's not working, try something new, right? Try something different, because it's the same, the definition of insanity. I'm doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same or different results. It's not going to happen. And you have to be prepared as the significant other, as the partner. You have to be prepared that this option might not work. And then the next option may start to work, but it might not work. And so the same thing with, are they ready? So I think I do mention in the book, he might not have been ready. at that particular time when he was going to AA meetings, and then when he was doing the outpatient treatment, he might not have been quite ready because he hadn't hit that rock bottom yet, the full on rock bottom. He had not hit it. And so he probably wasn't ready and prepared. Had he been ready and prepared, those options may have worked out just fine. And maybe, you know, would have been fine with just doing online meetings or in-person AA meetings or things like that. But that just all depends on the person's personality, whether or not they're ready to accept more help, or, you know, some things that may or may not work for that person. Like AA might not work for everybody, but there are other options out there that are a little bit different from AA meetings or things there. I do mention in my book, there are a couple other programs that Eich did find more helpful than AA. And yes, you can read that in my book there. I won't go into depth about those because they are very, very in-depth programs, but.
Yeah, well, that's so good, Rikki, because we're all different and God knows where we are in the journey and what we need. And like you said, it might not be the program per se. It might just not, it just might be a case where we're not ready yet. And again, God knows what we need. So he goes to treatment, he comes out. And did you kind of have that mindset like, okay, we're done, we're healed, we're good, we're ready to just move forward with life? It's over, right? The treatment is over. You're not drinking anymore. All good. Did you kind of think that way at first, and then your eyes were open, or did you expect, okay, we've still got a lot of work to do ahead of us?
It's a little of both. So I knew, you know, the drinking part was under control after he got out of treatment. He had 30 days of sobriety under his belt. Now he's coming home, but I was very scared for him to come home because now he's got to do it on his own. Even though, you know, he has the resources and he has the contacts for the help, he still has to do the work. So I was really scared that, you know, I know relapse. I always knew relapse, excuse me, was going to be a problem.
Yes.
You know, in the first couple of years of sobriety, that relapse is way up here, you know, after being home, especially after being in a treatment facility where everything is there, all the help is right there around the corner.
Yes.
You don't have the temptation. Now you're out in the world, all that temptation is back, all that stress is back. So yes, in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad he's sober, but what's next? Now what problem and challenge am I going to face next?
I think that's really helpful for people to understand. And, you know, you talk about things in your book, Rikki, that people deal with, but maybe they don't want to talk about it. They don't really understand. And so your book is so helpful for that person who has a loved one who's struggling with an addiction or life controlling issue to understand these things, because a lot of people just don't know what to expect. So kudos to you for writing it and putting it out there, because again, it's going to be very, very helpful to many. All right. One of the things I really want to talk about, and we could talk about a lot of this, but again, people need to get the book, is the pause. Okay. Post-acute withdrawal symptom. You really hit that a lot in the book. If you could just share kind of what that is, and it's another thing that people should expect and anticipate because it's a real thing, and how you and Eich dealt with that.
Yes. So for me, I had no idea what it was. I didn't know it was a thing until it happened to Eich. So you go through withdrawal at the beginning, right? So, you know, you have the sweats and the shaky hands, and you're going through the nausea from being in withdrawal from your substance and not having that substance in your body is trying to put itself back together.
Right.
So post-acute withdrawal syndrome comes in after you've been sober for quite some time. So now he's been sober for 30 days. He comes home, and in treatment, they give you all the vitamins and the balanced meals that you need to keep your body healthy while you're there. But now it's your job when you come home to keep up the vitamins and the water and the balanced meals and the exercise. And if you don't keep that up, your body is going to respond to that. So for Eric, after a few days home, he acted like he was still drunk, and I accused him of drinking again. I'm like, what's going on? You just got out of treatment and now you're drunk again. And he slept. So he slept it off like all night. And then, for the rest of the day, he woke up in the morning and I talked to him, but I'm like, what's going on? And he assured me that he was not drinking. And the reason I chose to believe him, which some of you might think I'm crazy for believing him, because come on, he looked like he was completely wasted. And, but I knew him so well that if he had been lying to me, he would have broke down, he would have cried, he would have been really hard on himself.
Okay.
But he had no idea what I was talking about. He's like, no, I wasn't drinking, no. And so, so I chose to research it and look up, well, what the heck is going on? And, I found some things from his treatment program. He brought home a stack of papers about this big.
Right. And we're all about reading all of those when we get home from any medical procedure. Right? Just go read that material. No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I did go through it though, and I did find pause. Looked it up online, and I asked Eric about it. He's like, well, yeah, they explain that in treatment. I'm like, okay, well, explain it to me then.
Right.
They also call it dry drunk. Like, okay. So I researched pause and dry drunk together. I Google everything. And so I came up with, people at first are making up this whole pause thing because that's their excuse for getting drunk again. But dry drunk syndrome, or pause, it's the same thing. So you can still act like you're drunk, even though you're not, because your body is trying to heal. It's trying to put itself back together. Your brain, you messed with it so much during your active addiction that it doesn't know what to do with itself anymore. It can't keep up with all the new things you're doing. And so you need to be aware of what you have to do. And I mentioned in the book all these different things that you can try and do, and it's not a one size fits all.
Exactly.
And it can happen for the rest of your life, or, you can figure out how to control it and it won't happen as often. In the past month, Eric has had a lot of symptoms of pause because moving to Arizona was a big change. The heat. And we've discovered this week that I think it's heat that's affecting him. He works outside every day, and, he has the fans, and he drinks his water and eats the healthy foods that he's supposed to be eating, and he's doing everything else. And all of a sudden he's coming home and sleeping for the rest of the day. And so this week, it's Wednesday, Monday and Tuesday, he came home and he was perfectly fine. And well, what did you do different? What did you do different this week than you did last week? Because last week you came home and slept and you acted all funky because, what happened?
Right.
He's like, well, I stood inside and stood under the fan and, I did this and this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, do that more.
Yeah.
It's trial and error with pause. Absolutely trial and error. And at the beginning, it was the vitamins. He had been taking them in treatment, came home, stopped taking them. So let's get you back on these vitamins. And I do list out in the book what vitamins they do recommend for sober people or people that are newly sober. What vitamins they absolutely need, because your body has been deprived of so many vitamins and nutrients over your active addiction that it needs to put itself back together, and it will take time.
That's good. This is also helpful. And, I was just thinking with the pause situation, like he acted drunk, you accused him of drinking, and, some people might say, I'm out. Like, you cross the line, you cross the boundary, I'm out, without realizing that this can happen. And you really set a great example of the communication, right? And that you put that in the book. That's something that you really need to do. Like, how are you feeling? What's going on? What did you do differently? And having that communication is so key in this journey of recovery. And I think that's really important for people to understand. So thank you for sharing that about the pause. I had no idea that it was a thing, but I think that's really going to help people. So we don't have a whole lot of time left. We have so many things that we could talk about, but one important thing, and you kind of hinted on it earlier, is the proactive steps that you can take for self-care, not only for your physical well-being, but your emotional well-being and your spiritual well-being as well. So if you could, you mentioned the vitamins, you mentioned drinking a lot of water. I mean, those seem like such simple things, but so very important as your body's trying to heal and detox from everything that you've exposed it to over the years, right? So what would you say, maybe 2 or 3 very important things that are helpful for people to do on the recovery process once treatment is, quote, over?
I think the most important thing is getting your vitamins, getting that water, and eating your balanced meals.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have, there are books out there. One of them I have is The Sober Kitchen. And it will go through all these different things that you should be eating once you're sober. So, you have to have, they do recommend 3 balanced meals a day, plus 3 snacks in between those meals. And they should be healthy snacks. I know Eric still eats his chips and his candies sometimes, but he needs to have the protein and the carbohydrates, enough of those during the day. If you don't have enough of those healthy meals, your body's going to fight back. And there is the hypoglycemia, where your blood sugar is going to be way off. And that's a big thing in sobriety, where you were drinking all this alcohol, which turns into sugar in your body.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're not drinking that alcohol anymore, your body is like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me?
Yeah.
So you have to replace that with healthy foods to get your body back on track, which is, I think, one of the most important things, not just the vitamins, because the vitamins will help you get back to that healthy track, but you still have to keep those balanced meals.
That's good. And, it's like, okay, give me this great answer and this wonderful thing that I can do. Vitamins, water, 3 meals a day, eat healthy food. And that's something we can all do, right? And if we're supporting somebody who is struggling with a life-controlling issue or addiction, like, we can do that. Drinking more water, eating balanced meals, taking supplements, vitamins, that's something that we should all be doing, whether we have an addiction or not. And so that's a beautiful way, something that you can do together for the benefit of each other. So I absolutely love that. Well, like I said, Rikki, there are so many things that we could talk about, but our time is coming to a close. But one of the things that you said in the book was that this is not easy. It is a battle, but it's a battle worth fighting for.
Yes.
And here you are in a new state, in a new home, kind of a fresh beginning, and working on your marriage and supporting each other. I just love that. So if you could just close with just some parting words for that person who is supporting a significant other or supporting a loved one. It might be a child, it might be a parent. If you could just speak to that person and encourage that person, because it is not easy, but it's a battle worth fighting for.
Yes. So if you are one of those people like me who is supporting someone through an addiction and sobriety, I encourage you to do everything you can to help that person and help yourself. You have to support each other in everything you're doing. If he's not drinking or taking these drugs, you need to stop doing that too. I do mention that in my book. It is your choice. If you choose to drink still as your partner is not, that's your choice. But I'll tell you that it is 100 times easier if you just stop doing it too, because then you're not going to have that temptation anymore. You're not going to have that temptation inside the house anymore. And you won't be coming home from being with your friends and maybe being a little tipsy, and they're going to see that. So yes, do everything you can to support that person.
Mm-hmm.
Change your lifestyle right along with them so that they know that this is doable. Because you need to be just as strong as them. It is a battle worth fighting, but it's a battle that you need to face together. Nobody goes into battle alone, because what's going to happen if you go into battle alone? You're going to die, right?
Yeah.
Be there for them and do everything you can to help them through this.
Amen. That's so good. And, you know, God helps us fight our battles as well. And you talk about that aspect of praying and connecting with God. And I love that. I'm all about that for sure. So the book is The Dark Side of Sobriety. It's coming out very soon. I will let everybody know how to get a copy. It's about how to help a loved one without losing yourself. And that's so very important. So Rikki, thank you so much for being our guest today. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the book. And I hope that it goes far and wide because people need to hear this message. And bless you and Eich for the courage to put it out there.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I want to thank our audience for watching this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go for encouragement on their journey with God. If you're new, please give us a like or follow. And if you feel led, I'd love it if you'd share this message out because I know there's somebody you know who needs to hear what Rikki had to say today. So God bless you, Rikki. Thank you to our audience, and we'll see you next time on Voices of Recovery. Bye-bye.